There is always something there to remind me. Ba-dum-bum-bum-bum. Always something there to remind me. Yes. Hello. I'm glad you're probably happy that intro didn't carry on any longer than that. Namo Amida Boo. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you are, in whichever realms of existence you are, in whatever mind states you are, whatever conditions you're in. Welcome. Little hint in the intro as to the topic of this video. So there's always something there to remind me of my karmic condition, my karmic causes and conditions. Always something there to remind me that this is samsara. This is the Saha world on Jambudvipa, Earth, if that's where you are. If you're a being from another realm, you're somewhere else. You're not on Jambudvipa. But anyway, that's a song that has been in my life a long, long time, actually, since I was a kid. But it took on a major sort of life for me in high school when it came out in the 80s. The 80s cover, I should say, that came out in the 80s. I don't recall the band that covered that song in the 80s. But I just liked the song. But later on, probably late 80s into the 90s, it started to kind of be a kind of, I didn't know it at the time, but it was associated with me recognizing my karmic condition, the karmic state I was in, the world, the realm of samsara that I'm in. When something would happen that would remind me of that. Mostly though, at that time, it was just about myself. And I didn't, like I said, I wasn't conscious of it as a reminder, when things would happen in life that were a karmic reminder, or a reminder, not karmic reminder, a reminder of my karmic state. Wasn't conscious of it at that time in that way. Sorry, a bit muddy here. Gotta be careful with my footing. And it was just more when things would remind me of who and what and how I really was, basically. When I get caught up in my fantasies of like, oh, I'm going to be this, I'm going to do that, this is what I'm going to achieve, this is what I'm going to be, or, oh, I got this, new situation now and it's going to be great and blah, blah, blah. And then something would happen that would totally remind me, like, actually, no. Actually, this is what your life is like. This is who you are. It was a very negative thing. It was a very, very negative thing at that time. Later, I came to see it as a very positive thing. But so whenever something like that would happen, that song would come to mind. Always something there to remind me. And, that kind of was more or less how it was. And then eventually, probably somewhere in the noughties, started to really make the connection of, my karmic state is why I am this way. My karmic causes is the reason that my karmic condition is this way. I started to kind of become more conscious of that in the noughties as like karma. A little bit before then, bits before that, maybe in the 90s a bit, but pretty much in the noughties is when I became conscious of, okay, this is, and that would be, it started to be a reminder associated with that, a reminder, you know, when something would happen, and it would jolt me back into kind of some reversion of reality of like, oh yeah, this is my karmic state, this is my idiotic state, this is my screwed up state, this is my blah 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 whatever, you know, and that's, you know, and I would relate it to, I'd started to relate it to, okay, it's because of my karmic condition, it's because of my karmic past, my karmic causes that I'm this way. And also, you know, and so that song would come to mind. Always something to remind me. And I also was in the early noughties that I started to get the idea of, I began to realize like, okay, how can, both in a Buddhist way and and just in a secular way, right? I came to the conclusion that how screwed up. You know, where I was at for a while, I was just kind of in a fairly secular state of mind. I would say I was never really a non-believer in something beyond the material world. I was never not that. I was just, there was times where I was didn't think you could know that. You couldn't really know that, which is still true actually. As a Buddhist, I can't know. You know, I realized I can't really know that realm as a human being, we don't have access to those realms. So anyway, you know, directly, we just can't perceive them. You know, I'm sure there's some humans with certain karmic causes and conditions who have certain abilities in that area. Genuinely, not the hoaxsters and the jokers that pretend that they are psychic and, you know, have psychic powers and all this and awareness of things or can sense things. Like, no, I mean, there's probably some people, a rare few people who actually have the karmic causes and conditions where they have some level of that. And, you know, genuinely. But anyway, at that point in my life, I was kind of, you know, more secular. I just kind of viewed things from a secular standpoint. Not that I was not that I, you know, disregarded spiritual, a spiritual perspective completely. It was just that it just kept things simpler for me to just approach life from a secular perspective. But even in that framework where I was at, in the early noughties, I came to this conclusion where I was like, okay, how can the egoic mind help the egoic mind? How, and then also, like, how screwed up humans are in this time, just from my own observations and while looking at the world and looking at societies and looking at, you know, psychology and all these things that we tried to propose as solutions to the human condition, quote unquote. I came to this point where I was like, well, how? And that's all broken, basically. So not only are individual humans broken and unfixable, but so is society. So is anything that arises from our collective human experience, like psychology or, you know, all these things, psychology or, you know, counseling or political solutions or All that stuff is broken. So I had this thing where I was like, how can something that's broken and sick fix itself with its sick and broken things that are all any solution or any method that it would try to use to fix itself would make it worse, and has made it worse. If you look at a lot of things that propose to be solutions, they turned into, everything turns into, anything. It has probably most of the time, anything that humans have come up with in civilization, there's been so many beautiful things, but oftentimes things that offered changes or solutions in the end were created monstrosities, like in technologies, various technologies and things like that. So the anyway, so I came to this point where I was like, and so not only can society and civilization and humans, anything that we come up with can't fix itself because its methods are all going to be tainted and sick and dysfunctional, and so we'll only make it worse. And also, how can an individual ego fix an ego? How can an individual egoic being undo its ego, like with its ego? I came to that conclusion just on like a secular basis, and then I was like, yeah, and so all those secular conclusions I would come to, and that's something actually I did for a long time too. Even in the 90s a bit, I'd come to that. I'd say, oh, and that's what, and I'd be like, so I'd always be, comparing, just coming to things, just conclusions like that, and then going, oh yeah, and that's what Buddhism says. Basically, that's what Buddhism says. Or vice versa. I'd go, perspectives. If I was more in a Buddhist or Taoist mindset, and I'd see something, come to a conclusion in a secular way, I'd be like, oh yeah, that's what Buddhism says. So anyway, so so yeah, in the early Nazis though, that's when I really realized that the egoic human mind cannot fix itself with its egoic human mind, and the collective human effort cannot fix the collective, anything collectively about humanity, because it's also and likewise tainted and can't fix itself because of that. So where was I? So yeah. So anyway, that was the early noughties. I realized that, and then that came into, really starting to get the whole idea of what it means to be in samsara, what it means to be in the Saha world, on Jambudvipa, on Earth. That is, what it means to what that actually means, karmically speaking, and experience wise, and karmically, and what that means in terms of the Buddhist teaching. That's when I really started to realize that. I was like, oh, that's what that means. And I kind of had to come to that in a secular way first. And then I was just like, oh, that's totally the Buddhist teaching. Anyway, so and so it was even more, once I got to that stage, things more and more became a reminder. When events would not go right, or I'd fall flat on my face, figuratively speaking, sometimes literally tripping and falling, that's when I really started to, that song would come to mind a lot, even more so. Always something there to remind me, yep, here we go again, samsara, oop, yep, there's my karmic condition. And that just became a thing. And then, shortly thereafter, having that experience, like I said, that, like I've talked about before, where I was actually doing some ironing and watching a video about this one guy that was trying to do had written a scientific paper on rebirth, and basically rebirth, lifetime after lifetime rebirth things. And he had submitted a paper on this, and like actually brought in science and all this stuff to it. So I was watching this video about it, and somewhere in there it really hit me, like, I've got no chance. This is like, I think 2005, something like that, 2005, 2007, somewhere in that range. And I just literally, it just crushed me, like the realization. I just, all at once. And I went down on my knees. That was actually the second time in the noughties I had a similar realization about things. But anyway, for this one, I'll just talk about that. I literally went on my knees and cried out to Amida Buddha, because I had remembered an article that I'd read in Tricycle magazine, and I think like 1994 or 95, something like that, about might have even been 1993, somewhere in that range, about Pure Land Buddhism. And at the time, I was like, oh, this is interesting, but that's not for me. I can be a practitioner of other forms of Buddhism because blah blah blah. The arrogance, the clueless, utterly clueless. Anyway, so I remembered that article at that moment, went on my knees and cried out to Amida, and thereafter, from then until now, sought the Amida Dharma, sought Pure Land Buddhist teachings, eventually found Jodo Shinshu, and the rest is kind of history. And so especially from that point on, when I learned the idea of like being an ordinary being, being a Bombu, being a foolish being, when I got that, then even more so everything became a reminder of that. But to me, by then, it was that was kind of a positive experience, a growingly positive experience, in the sense of it would always bring me back to Amida. It would always bring me back to the Pure Land teachings. It would always bring me back to, when something would happen, that reminder would come, and that song would come to mind, and it was a positive thing, because it just was it kept me more and more sort of in the mode of, I'm a foolish being, and I'm in samsara, and this is what it means, as best I could understand that. Always something there to remind me. And that I'll never be free. There's a line in that song where always something there to remind me. Always something there to remind me. So you could riff on it and say, I was born in samsara, and now I'll never be free until Amida takes me to his Pure Land, something like that. Anyway, but I'll never be free until Amida takes me to his Pure Land. There's no other means by which I can get free. There's no other means. Sorry about that, it was probably a bit cringe. Compounding the cringe from my earlier singing of the song. But anyway, so what was I saying? So the reminder is that I'm in samsara. There's nothing you can do about it. Nothing in and of yourself that you can do about it. Hence, you need Amida. If you want, if you're a Buddhist and you want to become a Buddha, this is your situation. You're in samsara. You're in the mappo. That was the other thing too that came into it too. So things reminding me in the news or in my life or whatever. It wasn't all these times where I say things would remind me of my samsaric condition weren't just things happening to me, actually. It was things in the news. It was things in, that remind me of samsara. Things just happening in with other people, things happening in the street, things just, occurring around me. Not just things happening to me, although a lot of times it was that way. I'd say, oh, yeah, always something there to remind me. So yeah, there's always something there to remind me. And this comes from Amida. I believe that it was Amida's light that had illumined this for me to help me start to see, even before I understood it as my karmic causes and conditions. Like I said, when I was kind of like in high school and university years in the 1990s, exploring Buddhism and things and trying to practice it. But anyway, I think it was Amida's light was already working in my life there and illuminating. There's a lot of things like that I'll talk about in later videos in my life where I believe that Amida was working in my life. But in this way, Amida's light illuminating and Amida's mind illuminating that, that reminder, things happen to associate that with eventually realizing that's my karmic condition, that's the samsaric condition, that's what we're in, that's what I'm in. And then eventually, once I learned about the Amida Dharma, actually started pursuing it, then that really came to fruition. So it's really all those not so good things that happen in samsara, within me, outside of me, in the world, on the news. It's all, it's all a good thing. Especially these times we're living in. The last couple of years, actually the last several years, actually, if you think about it, with all the stuff going on in the world, politically and all the various things going on, people just being completely brainwashed and manipulated by all kinds of things, and corporations, reaching their like pinnacle of power, they've been more powerful than governments for a long time, for decades. It's just now they're just not even hiding it anymore. But just corruption coming to light over the it's always been there, but like the last several years, just the corruption and the evil of the world leaders and all that stuff coming to light, and everything that's going on with this, with the last 2 years. Being careful what I say so it doesn't get censored, so the video doesn't get censored. But all that stuff going on is definitely a reminder we're in, not only in samsara, but in mappo. We are definitely in the latter age of the law, the tail end of the last 10,000 years end of the descending kalpa. We're at the very we're at the dropping off point, and all those things are reminders of that. Always, constantly something there to remind me, especially the last several years, like I said, that we live in mappo. We are definitely in the degenerate age. Just look at the state of people, like how ignorant and arrogant and polarized and just angry and completely brainwashed people are, like completely programmed, completely unthinking, completely greedy, completely selfish. Like, just think, and just how much that's come to light so much more in the last several years. So again, that, you know, it's horrible things, it's all horrible stuff, but it's all good for, if we're Amida Dharma followers, if we're Jodo Shinshu followers, it's all confirmation of the teachings. It's all confirmation of the need for, my need for Amida. It's all confirmation for my need for Amida's vow power, for Amida's other power to bring me to Pure Land. It's all reminders of where I am, when I am, and in what and in what condition I'm in, and what mind state I'm in, what situation I am in, you know, what realm I'm in. It's all reminders of that, and how dire that is. How dire that is. And it's just, like I said, increased since the noughties, but especially the last several years, me being, just seeing reality that way, seeing life that way, as just a constant reminder that of my karmic condition, our collective karmic condition, samsara, saha world, mappo, all that stuff, just almost constant. You just can't get away from it. It's just always in my face. It's always something there to remind me. So it's a very positive thing. It's a very, you know, to have that reminder, to have my mind work that way is a good thing. It's a really good thing, because it also keeps me, because I was talking about in other videos, it keeps me from spending very much time in other, you know, ideas of things I might do to solve it, or things I might do to, you know, you know, and just brings me back, reminds me, oh yeah, that's what this is. Oh yep, that's what this is. Back to Amida. Back to Amida. Back to the Amida Dharma. Back to the teaching. Back to listening deeply. Back to deep hearing. Back to working with my Dharma guide. Back to working with reading the teachings. Back to saying Nimbutsu. You know, you know, so it's a positive thing. Always something there to remind me. And I'm grateful for that. I'm very grateful for that. So I hope my singing and riffing on that song wasn't too cringe, but right. Thank you very much. I thank you for listening, and Namo Amida Bu.